And along with the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, we are delighted to launch the Buildings Pavilion activities today. So hopefully we get the sound right. Is that okay, or is it too loud? You're okay. Very good. Well, as all of you know, we collectively have to focus much more dramatically over the course of this decade in bringing down global emissions. You wouldn't be here if you weren't part of that collective action. Buildings have not yet been at the fore of our political agenda in the way that they can be, and with the opportunity to better connect people's lives, economic development, and our built environment. The buildings and construction sector must urgently be decarbonized if we are to meet our goals. So Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction and World Resources Institute are working closely with national governments around the world to commit to buildings as a critical part of the global agenda. We believe building decarbonization can be a primary opportunity for national governments, and that in developing decarbonization roadmaps, we can ensure that these goals become reality. Global ABC and our partnerships have been working to build the roadmaps in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and as a way of building the construction sector's view and vision of a 2050 net zero carbon world. We have over 8 main activities, including looking at the emissions reductions, looking at resiliency, looking at materials, and building in the full life cycle of our thinking in emissions management and in improving the resiliency of buildings for people everywhere. These aspirational goals are around both short and medium, as well as long-term targets and timelines toward achieving a zero-emission, efficient, resilient built environment, and in bringing the construction sector to the fore in terms of our climate change response. World Resources Institute has an effort that is working in 2 countries called the Xerocarbon Buildings Accelerator, funded by the Global Environment Facility. And we launched in 2021 an opportunity to support the national and subnational governments of Turkey and Colombia as they work towards decarbonization efforts and their roadmaps to zero carbon buildings. In our sessions with the governments and with mayors in Turkey and Colombia, they have been building out a 2030 and 2050 goals for their sectors. The partners in this process are working in stakeholder collaborative engagements that build a transformative action agenda in their countries. We believe that these types of multi-stakeholder engagements can complement the important policy work and the road mapping processes that are so essential for governments to put in place the foundation for that action. So today we are going to hear across the board from a variety of different government representatives about this agenda, how they are addressing and building forward towards a zero carbon built environment, and how they view the collective need that their governments face in terms of these actions. We have an opportunity today to do this in collaboration as part of the zero carbon buildings goals at COP. And we know that, in fact, we have the opportunity to do this with a variety of stakeholders represented in the room. We will be turning to all of you and those of you online for questions as we go. But to open the session, I'd like to invite Martina Otto, the Chief of Energy and Climate at the United Nations Environment Program and the head of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction's Secretariat. Martina is not here with us in the room today, but she is attending live. So we're going to move to Martina. Welcome, Martina. Thank you so much for your leadership. Martina, you're still on mute somehow. We're going to need to have you try one more time.
Is it working now? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. We'll be getting used to this over the next few days. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And it's really wonderful to be with you, despite the fact that I'm not in Glasgow. It's wonderful to see as well that this pavilion has seen the light of the day. And we're very proud that there is, for the first time, such an emphasis in a pavilion on the built environment. And you said already, Jennifer, mention the importance of the sector in climate action. You mentioned the carbon footprint of buildings and construction with the building operations and also the materials used in construction. And some of the biggest mitigation opportunities proven and at low cost are actually really in this sector. And on top, they come with job creation potential and an opportunity to address qualitative and quantitative housing deficits that are prevailing. So it's actually too good to be true, but against this background, it's even more surprising that we have seen progress being made today in a much too slow manner. We have recently launched the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction Global Status Report for buildings and construction. And that report is issued every year. And it pointed to a 10% reduction of CO2 emissions compared to 2019. That looks like a good story. And it is, obviously. But it covers up a little bit the fact that this is mostly temporary only, because it's due to economic downturn and deep changes in the way we do use buildings linked to the pandemic. And why are we saying that? Because we've examined the different things that need to fall into place to prove that action is taken in sufficient depth. And those signals that the needed sector transformation is well underway are actually missing. So we look at, most likely re-increase back to where we were when the economy is picking up again. And what we're really missing is this transformation. We're still working on incremental improvements. And just as in all the other sectors, the incremental improvements, they're good, they're laudable, but they're too little too slow. And too little too slow will make us miss the turn to the pathway that allows us to stay within a limit of 1.5 degree warming. So that said, maybe a couple of additional numbers from our global status report. And it's again and again, it's this story of there's a piece of good news and then there's a piece of it's not enough. Since 2015, 19 additional countries have put into place building codes. And that gets the number up to 80. So that's good news. However, most of the places where most of the new buildings are expected to be built do not yet have any building energy codes in place. So not enough. Buildings energy efficiency has now become the second most mentioned topic in the nationally determined contributions submitted, which is fantastic news as well. But most do lack concrete measures, targets, or this full life cycle perspective that Jennifer also mentioned already. Then the investments, similar story, investments in energy efficiency in buildings have been up. But for every dollar invested in energy efficiency in buildings, we have $37 invested in the mainstream. And then let us not forget that buildings are also vulnerable. And I think we've seen quite a bit in the recent past of that. And that is the places that we count on to have shelter. And that means as well that, we are more vulnerable, not only our buildings, and our investments into these assets are vulnerable too. And if we take the fact that most buildings that will be built in the next years will be around in 2050 and in 2070 and possibly beyond, but the climate that they will encounter will be very different. And obviously I'm thinking about the heat waves, the floodings, the sea level rise, and so on. So there is so many good reasons to act and to act fast. And this, is a little bit behind the vision that has been set out with the Marrakesh Partnership, Global Climate Action, Human Settlements Pathway. to which we contributed. And it's a very important first step into the right direction, to have a vision, to have it set out clearly and formulated, also with the sense of direction and the numbers. And while the goals are formulated for 2030 and for 2050, respectively, this does not mean that we have to wait until then, or that we can actually afford waiting until then. We need to put into place the scaffolding to build up this vision into reality. And that involves policies, finance, the capacity of the workforce, and so on, and that right now. And I won't tell the whole story of the vision, how it was formulated, but it's very clearly saying that by 2030, the built environment should halve its emissions. There's a focus first on new buildings, because that's easier to be achieved. And then an interim target for the energy efficiency retrofits, because they are super important, and our retrofit numbers, the rate of improvement is way too slow. And then increasingly looking also at what we call the embodied carbon, to get our hands around this area as well, looking at the materials that are being used and how we can actually decarbonize there as well. And then by 2050, really at the latest, get to these new and existing assets being net zero across the whole life cycle. And how do we turn the vision into reality? And Jennifer alluded to it already, the roadmaps. The Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, together with the International Energy Agency, and WRI was involved in the process as well, did develop a global and 3 regional roadmaps for buildings and construction for Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And they're both very much a framework and a process. And they represent a comprehensive approach to emission reductions from the built environment along the full life cycle, with aspirational targets and milestones for the short, the medium, and the longer term, towards achieving the zero emission, efficient, and resilient buildings and construction. And they can be really used for the processes at home at national level, pulling in the different actors as well, from all the different subnational levels to the private sector, to really all stakeholder groups. And since the launch of the roadmaps, the Global ABC has worked with partners to leverage the powerful tool that these roadmaps do present, and to really support countries in setting up paths. And 2 countries are already in, very well advanced, almost final stages of their national roadmap development, and that's Vietnam, together with with PEEP, and Cambodia through a UNEP UNDP partnership. And there are many more such efforts underway. And the Global ABC also hosts a roadmap coordination hub, which does bring together the key organizations working in building roadmap development to exchange on barriers, opportunities, and also the transfer of experience, which is so important to help us all accelerate and learn from each other. And that's now 18 organizations working in 17 plus roadmaps. I mentioned that the roadmaps that are both a framework and a process. A framework because they help think through the relevant aspects, and Jennifer mentioned the 8 key priority areas that really go beyond the building and look also all the way to urban planning, to the energy system, so the integration of the building in a bigger system, and a process. But because what we really need is this deep collaboration and concerted action between all the actors along the value chain. And and it really helps as well, I mean, creating that space for positive feedback loops to come in between responsible private sector action and policy frameworks that are enabling incentive schemes that help get to a race to the top in a sense. And we're launching the Buildings as a Critical Climate Solution country commitments that builds on existing such commitments already, taking us from the US Secretary General Summit Zero-Carbon Buildings Commitment to now the Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. And it really looks at measures in NDC updates, it looks at building codes, and it looks at systematically utilizing public buildings and public procurement to drive market change. And we are very proud to announce that Chile, Jordan, and Switzerland have joined the Buildings as Critical Climate Solution Country Commitment and joined thereby the group of overall 12 countries, as well as the many cities and companies who have already made similar pledges to a decarbonized vision of the sector by 2050. And we'll have the pleasure to listen to our representatives, just as we will hear from the Zero-Carbon Buildings Accelerator as well. And as we listen to these examples of leadership, we invite all stakeholders of the built environment to join an ever-growing race to zero and race to resilience. And we have long referred to the built environment as the sleeping giant of climate action. And now that this giant has woken up, let's make together these giant steps to a sector transformation for buildings that we need and that we deserve. And with that, well, I hand back over to you, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to revisit and come back and talk a little bit more about that in a few moments with a panel. But first, we're going to do a quick couple of videos that are going to describe a little bit of the importance to cities. And I'm going to, as we are teeing up the videos, I'm going to get the slide kicker, which is across the stage from me. So we wanted to very quickly share with you a bit about the Zero-Carbon Buildings Accelerator, which has already performed baseline national assessments and a gap analysis through a stakeholder process in Colombia and in Turkey. And we're going to first start with a few videos from our implementing partners. We have Juan Nicolas Garraza Sanchez, who's the Deputy Minister of Environment Planning in Colombia, and Roy Alejandro Barreras Cortez, the Director of City Planning in Cali, Colombia. And they'll share their experiences as becoming part of the Zero Carbon Buildings Accelerator work. So, to the videos.
Bu güzel mavi gezegeni emisyonlar ile karartmayalım istiyoruz. Bu konuda başlattığımız her proje geleceğimiz daha temiz, daha sağlıklı, daha sürdürülebilir olması için çok önemli bir rol üstleniyor. Gaziantep Büyükşehir Belediyesi olarak birim sertifikalı, çevre dostu kamu binamız, pasif ev ve LEED Platinum sertifikalı ekolojik binamız ile şehrimiz için yaptığımız tüm enerji projelerini önce binalarımızda uyguluyor, sonra şehrimizde kullanmaya başlıyoruz. Herkes güvende olana kadar kimse güvende değildir düşüncesiyle 2011 yılında iklim eylem plan değişikliğini hazırlayan ilk belediye olmanın hakkını vermek için yaptığımız güneş, biyogaz, rüzgar enerji tesislerimiz ile yenilenebilir enerjiyi şehrimize kazandırdık. 2018'de sürdürülebilir enerji ve iklim eylem planı ile Başkanlar Akdi'ne imza attık. 2030 yılına kadar kent genelinde %40 karbon emisyon azaltım taahhüdünü verdik. Gaziantep'te doğanın döngülerine saygılı, enerji kaynaklarının etkin bir şekilde kullanıldığı, kentimizin daha çevreci, doğaya duyarlı bir kent haline dönüşmesi için ilimizde seçilen bir köyde ekolojik köy projesi hayata geçiriyor. Proje içerisinde ekolojik tasarım, yeşil üretim, ekolojik mimari, alternatif enerji, enerji verimliliği, yeşil ulaşım, sıfır atık, su tasarrufu uygulamaları ve benzeri birçok ekolojik yöntemlerden yararlanarak köy, ekolojik köy yaşamına uygun hale getirilecektir. Kent genelinde gerçekleştirdiğimiz bu projeler ile Çevre ve Şehircilik Bakanlığı ve Küresel Çevre Fonu GEF işbirliğiyle gerçekleştirilen sıfır karbon binalar projesinde pilot şehir olmaktan mutluluk duyuyoruz. Küresel düşünüp yerel olarak hareket ederken daha iyi bir yarın için enerjini koru, dünyayı koru diyoruz.
Küresel Çevre Fonu tarafından desteklenen, Çevre ve Şehircilik Bakanlığı'nın faydalanıcı olduğu, Dünya Kaynakları Enstitüsü ve Birleşmiş Milletler Çevre Programı tarafından yürütülen Sıfır Karbon Binalar Projesi'nde yer almaya hak kazanan 2 pilot şehirden biri olarak proje kapsamında sizlerle çalışacak olmaktan mutluluk duyuyoruz. Konya, iklim değişikliğinden en çok etkilenen bölgelerin başında gelmektedir. Konya merkez, topografik yapısı nedeniyle hava kirliliği ile ilgili sürekli sıkıntılar yaşamaktadır. Hava kirliliği ile mücadelede de diğer önlemlerin yanında binalarda enerji verimliliği, yalıtım çalışmaları, yenilenebilir enerji uygulamaları gibi faktörler büyük önem taşımaktadır. Ayrıca Konya ili yenilenebilir enerji kaynaklarından güneş enerjisi açısından güneşlenme gün sayısı olarak ülkemizin en önemli alanlarının başında gelmektedir. Kişi başına düşen yeşil alan miktarlarını arttırıyoruz, enerji verimliliğine önem veriyoruz, yenilenebilir enerji kaynaklarını etkin olarak kullanıyoruz. Tüm bu çalışmalarımızla sıfır karbonlu binalar projesindeki hedeflerimiz ise sıfır karbon binalar için yol haritaları, yerel stratejileri ve eylem planlarını hazırlama, belediye tesislerinde pilot çalışmalar yürütmek, örnek binalar teşkil edip bunu yaygınlaştırmak, küresel iklim değişikliğiyle mücadele ve dayanıklılık hedeflerine ulaşmak, iklim değişikliği ile ilgili ulusal veya uluslararası taahhütlere katkı sağlamak, karbon salınımını en aza indirmek veya sıfırlamak asıl beklentimiz olup, sera gazı salınımını düşürerek geleceğimize daha temiz ve kaliteli bir yaşam alanı bırakmak. Yaşanabilir bir şehir, temiz bir çevre, daha temiz ve kaliteli bir yaşam alanı bırakmaya katkı sağlamak. Belediye çalışanlarının kapasitesini arttırmak. Herkes için daha sağlıklı ve yaşanabilir şehirler geliştirmeyi hedefliyoruz. Konya Büyükşehir Belediyesi, güçlü kurumsal yapısı ve geniş hizmet ağı ile 31 ilçe ve 1200 mahallede hizmet vermektedir. Tüm bu hizmetlerin verilmesinde birçok hizmet binaları yer almakta olup, sıfır karbon binalar çalışmasının pilot olarak belediye tesislerinde hayata geçirilmesi bile proje çıktıları açısından büyük önem taşımaktadır.
There we go. Thank you to the mayors for joining us today virtually, and we are so pleased that we're able to talk about this both from the policy making and national government level, and also from the experiences on the ground. What does it take to do implementation? How do we get the market to align with the policy intent, and what do we learn along the way? So I am delighted to invite to the stage our speakers today, or our panel, our fireside chat specialists today. And what I will do is we'll have a microphone, a handheld microphone brought up to the stage for you so that you can each, as you come up, take your microphone and we'll get you seated on stage and we'll begin our fireside chat. So if I could have Roy Alejandro Barreras Cortez from Cali. No, he is not. Yeah, there he is virtually. Okay, he's on the screen. There we go. Thank you very much. And if we could also have the, let's see, Roy Alejandro, we've got Juan Nicolas Galarza Sanchez from the Deputy Minister of Environment Planning for Colombia. If you could come up and join me on stage, and we'll do this virtually. Yeah, that way it's a little fireside chat-like. Wonderful. So I'm going to give you both a moment to just introduce yourselves and the work you're doing, and then we'll dive into a few questions with regards to how you viewed the decarbonization in the building sector from the government, from within the government. Yours is working. From within the government. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. And let's see if we could have you, Mr. Galarza Sanchez, if you could start us off.
Sure. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. It's great to be at this COP. I want to thank you, Jennifer. This morning, I think my kickoff meeting was with Annie Dasgupta, and we have had a very fruitful relationship with the WRI, and through that, we've been inspired to push the agenda forward in Colombia in terms of following the decarbonization agenda for buildings, and it's great to be here. I was really looking forward to going back and meeting people. So
wonderful.
There's that.
Thank you. And if we could, then also, Roy, would you like to talk a little bit about your opening remarks on Cali? Not yet. We can't hear you. There we go. Getting there? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Hello. And thank you, Jennifer, and It's really an honor for us to be able to share with everyone at this COP26 event our experience and our efforts to mitigate and reduce the impact from our building sector in our city on the environment. So we hope that these efforts that we're undertaking will be successful, and we hope that these efforts will be able to be replicated and be able to serve as an example to other Latin American cities.
Wonderful. Well, we've been working in partnership for a number of years on the built environment, as well as on transportation and other important areas of work. And so tell us, Deputy Minister, where are you in increasing your ambition? How do you view the need for us to think differently about the building sector?
Well, I have a particular position because prior to joining the government as a vice minister, I was the head of cities at the Housing and Cities Ministry as well, and there we worked on the updation of the code. So we were just hearing that 19 countries had joined and developed a new code, and there we did a lot of work. I didn't manage to finish it because I was appointed as vice minister, but it's a process and a project that is close to my heart, that I think we need to do a lot of. And on that end, you might have heard Colombia, by instruction of President Duque, is committed and has developed and established a very high ambition in terms of greenhouse gases reduction, 51% by 2030. And the build sector is rather important. So I'm gonna mention a couple of things on that regard. The first one is that Colombia is particular in the sense that our electric matrix is rather clean. It's the 6th cleanest in the world because we have a lot of hydro. Yet President Duque's commitment to move forward the non-renewables is very high, and we've gone from having 0.2% of our energy matrix on non-renewables, and we'll end up the government having 14%. So a significant shift, and of course this affects the energy consumption and the impact of energy consumption on the built environment. Now, on that end, we just launched this morning as well the decarbonization strategy, Colombian carbon neutral strategy, aiming for 2050. And one specific point that we're aiming to develop is having a net zero carbon program for the built environment. And I think this happens to us a lot, and I think, I really enjoy and like the way the coalition or the accelerator is built, is because it's not just focused on new buildings and new developments. And there is a lot to be done, probably from the 70s to the 2000s, let's say. The bulk of the built infrastructure of Colombia was built, and unfortunately we had a big share of informal development. So the fact that we're putting on the map the existing stock, not just formal but informal as well, is very, very important. And that is embedded on the strategy that we are actually developing. We believe that that is a strong innovation. We will be seeing the bulk of urbanization happening in Africa, and we'll get there. I did a lot of my background work when I was working as a researcher at NYU, promoting orderly urban expansion. And we need to do a lot more on that end. But till we get there, I think it's very relevant to have both components, the new stock and the existing stock, and seeing how we can transition to the existing stock becoming net zero carbon. That's why we've joined the Accelerator program. We are feeding on the results that we're producing, and we're very thrilled to work with Director of City Planning Alejandro in Cali, and also the city in Bogota, to make this happen and put it forward and have it very structured as part of our entire national policy for decarbonization.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how that plays out in the city level. So if you could, tell us a little bit about Kali and how that, as Director of City Planning, how does this translate into what you do on the ground with regards to both existing and new buildings?
With Mayor, can you hear?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear. The administration, the local administration, with Mayor Martina, committed to its 4-year development plan to reducing our carbon footprint in our environment.
And that means to transform the way we are building our city. As our Deputy Minister said, most cities in Colombia grew very quickly in the past few decades. And we, as the third largest city in Colombia, duplicated our population over the past 50 years. We went from having 900,000 people to over 2 million people now, and we're continuing to grow. And that means both informal and formal new developments every day. We are licensing, we are building new residential spaces at a rate of over 800,000 square meters per year, and that's just the formal. So we are a city that's quickly growing, and as we all know, most room for improvement is found at the local level. So we found the need to change the way we are building our city, and we try to make the best of the powers we had as a city. Colombia is a very centralized state with a lot of power of regulation being concentrated in the national administration. But we do issue construction permits. We do handle the zoning and the land use planning. And we said we should try and use that. So what we did was what we issued, entering into City Council with a proposal for a sustainable construction manual, a sustainable construction code that will have over 120 sustainability criteria that we are hoping new developers will be meeting, and we're trying to incentivize them to meet those criteria and hopefully reduce our footprint.
Wonderful. And how then, if we could go back to the national government, how are you working with the local governments in this road mapping process? Where and how does that conversation come together? And tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Certainly, Colombia, being a fairly decentralized country, doesn't necessarily relies on the central government for actually have things implemented in the ground. We develop the national framework and the national guidelines. There's the resolution 0524, which is the national code for sustainable construction in Colombia. But the way we see it happening is in the cities, and for that reason, there are two aspects that you need to bear in mind when putting this together. And the work we've been doing with the two cities that have joined the Accelerator program, Bogota and Cali, are pilots that are going to be showing the way. And we've seen how locally within their town scheme plans and their building codes, they're already including that. We have tried to put the right incentives. Particularly, we have had a fairly successful policy for social housing subsidized. Is a demand-driven policy, and we're starting to allocate a higher subsidy on housing projects that are including a sustainability aspect of consumption of energy and water. And I think the work that we're doing also has led to important new ideas we'd like to think that we're doing good work, but I think the field is fairly new when you're talking about renewables, and there is so much that's been done, and in Colombia is also a challenge because the bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions do not come from cities because our grid is very clean. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to act and that we need to put the different measures in place. And then we have built together, we have done a prioritization of different topics, built with the local governments, and that has led out to say, okay, let's focus on what people want to see, not kind of an imposed top-bottom approach. And we are talking about something basic, but sometimes you need to go back to basics in order to have things being implementable on the ground. So we have the supply and use of materials, operation of management of buildings as well, promoting across efficient use of energy, water and materials. And then additional things that probably were not part of the roadmap were suggested, and now they are part of the roadmap. That's the value of doing this with the communities and with the local governments, promoting 100% of circular materials that are used to reduce waste. Of course, an increased use of non-conventional renewables, and also promoting green corridors and enhancing the green canopy in surrounding areas, because not everything has to do with the construction process itself. It has been proven and shown with an enhanced green canopy in the surroundings of buildings, you can significantly reduce the consumption of AC, and that on itself is a saving on families. So it's kind of a very well-rounded approach that has emerged out of this work that we're doing with local governments, like and with the team of Alejandro.
Wonderful. And in terms of why this is so important for Calo, you've covered a couple of the things, but I was also struck just now with the Vice Minister's comments around reducing the energy load, the energy burden for the consumer. For Cali, what are the most important factors, and what do you see as some of the opportunities for you in this process at the city level?
Okay, I think our largest opportunity is that we are a city that is at a turning point in its growth, and that we are not yet consolidated as a major city, and that gives us the chance to correct the path and try and do it correctly for the new developments. I think that's one of the largest opportunities we have. Also, as you can see, I made an effort to show you a little bit of our city. We're a warm climate city. We are a very comfortable city in terms of climate. So I think we have the chance to promote bioclimatic construction with natural lighting and natural venting, and that way we can reduce the energy consumption for residential buildings. And that's what we're trying to do, because our geography, the way we are located in our country, allows us to build with less energy. And of course, we also have in the surroundings in our city, we have the availability for materials, and we also have the opportunity to reuse materials. Our city currently disposes over 2,000 tons of building and construction residues each day. That's 2,000 tons each day, and that's that we see as an opportunity, because if we learn to reuse that material, to build eco bricks, that's what we call them, and aggregates, and reuse those materials in our new constructions, then we can reduce the impact on in our environment, because much of those materials end up being disposed informally in public spaces and in and causing a lot of harm to our environment. So that's why we're trying to take advantage of the waste we're producing. We're trying to reuse that, and the opportunities our geography and climate have given us.
I know that we're at the final part of this portion, our fireside chat portion of the agenda, and I also know that we have a speaker who has to depart very shortly. So I'm wondering if we could alter and offer him a moment early to offer a few remarks as we close this fireside chat. So I do want to just say thank you, and if possible, if there are any questions from the audience on Colombia and the decarbonization and the built environment in Colombia, if we could just take one or two quick questions. Yes?
If I'm not mistaken, Colombia is a major coal exporter, is it not?
The question is whether or not Colombia is a major coal exporter.
And I'm wondering how that figures into national policies in terms of the energy mix and economic development. That was number one. Number two, which is somewhat related to what you've been talking about, could you address the barriers to energy efficient design and construction in the private sector versus the government sector, the things that are holding back the private sector in Colombia from rapid progress towards decarbonization?
So if you could paraphrase the question as you respond, in case there wasn't a microphone for the question.
Well, I guess you were asking if Colombia is a big coal exporter and how that plays within the energy matrix of Colombia. The question is yes. We have, I think, the second largest open sky coal mine, but the energy matrix, as I've been saying, is pretty clean, and we obtain most of it from hydro. So it's mainly kind of part of the demand. So it doesn't necessarily place out. There's of course a question, is the paradox of having these kind of resources and the need to apply them in order to generate income. But as I was mentioning, Colombia has a very, very clear path for energy transition. Even though it's already clean, we're really moving forward in the application of non-renewables and scaling up non-renewables. And in terms of the biggest challenges, both, I guess, on the private and on the public sector, I'd say the bulk of the projects that are subsidized by the government that would be qualified, let's say, as public housing are under a demand-driven scheme. So that means that they're developed still by the private sector. But in terms of big challenges, I think we have a pretty forward-looking real estate sector that has made significant efforts to join the decarbonization agenda. Recently, we launched a carbon neutrality program to provide technical assistance to the private sector broadly. We wanted to make this program very multi-sector, and the largest union, let's say, or a conglomerate of real estate, the Real Estate Association, joined as a whole and committed to achieving carbon neutrality. But I would say, though, that one big challenge is the fact that we have a 30-year-old legislation for urban development. I was seeing my colleague from Turkey and putting together the incentives, and Director Alejandro was mentioning how it is truly important to include the sustainable component, not just to buildings, but to a larger scale, to urban planning. And having a dated law doesn't necessarily make it easier. We have at this point, and that's a big challenge, which is why I'm raising it up, bringing it up is the fact that roughly 90% of towns and cities in Colombia have an outdated planning town planning scheme or a master plan, if you wanted to call it that way. And we need a set of legislation and regulations that put the incentives in the right way. I think 30 years ago, climate change was not such a pressing issue, and that is not reflected in our current legislation. So I think we need to move forward. That is a challenge, and I think plans are on the making. But when I used to be cities director at the Housing and Cities Ministry, what I did was to lay the basis for the updation of our legislation, and hopefully, I mean, we are within 11 months of finishing the term of the current president, and I think the next government will be able to update that law and put the right incentives in place and put carbon neutrality on the core of all the government plan, but particularly on the built environment sector.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Vice Minister. Thank you to the Director of Planning, Farkali. And with that, we're going to close this section of the agenda. We're going to move to the next, which is around building out the NDC roadmaps and the buildings as a critical climate solution effort, which Martina spoke about earlier. So thank you so much for joining us on stage. And if I could...
Thank you, Jennifer.
And thank you for joining virtually. It's a very interesting format doing this, a little bit different than we normally do. Thank you. We appreciate your leadership. All right, and now, if I could, we'll have on stage our next session. Oh, good, they've already.
Sí, ya.
Great. We have both the head of climate change at the Ministry of Environment for Chile. If I could have Maria Carolina Urmeneta La Barca join us on stage. Thank you so much. And we're going to get you a microphone here, as well as having, if I could, invite to the stage our other panelist, with Mr. Razmi Hamza, who's the CEO of the Jordan Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund. And I know, sir, that you have a very short period of time where you can speak with us. With your indulgence, we would allow Mr. Hamza to speak first. All right. The negotiations call. So please, if you could, offer a few reflections with us on your work in Jordan and how the buildings as a critical climate solution has worked forward for you in terms of policy and priority actions around strong and ambitious NDCs, the enabling and reliable policy frameworks, and how to lead by example.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for really the good signs that we received at this COP. Maybe from the G20 and from a country like US and Britain. I think good news coming on the way that the new commitments will be launched, I hope, and we are waiting really this commitment. Net zero in everything is our aims, and I think all of us at the COP really we are committed with 1.5, and the leaders in Rome, they really renewed their commitment with 1.5, even not 2. This is good. This is great. And last reports from IPCCs with the UN says that really we are in a dangerous situation regarding the temperature of the Earth, and this is our only Earth. In Jordan, we just launched and updated our NDCs. And we doubled our commitments from 14% to 31% by 2030. And we have a green economic Kyoto plan as well in parallel with this, as well as we have a very clear strategy and with good ambitious for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And Jordan Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund is a governmental institution working under the umbrella of the Ministry of Energy, so that there is a commitment, governmental commitment, really, of funding all the activities of renewable and energy efficiency what we do really is subsidizing and designing programs for all the sectors, including the households, our governmental building, as well as on the plan, same as the residential and the private sector building. Now we have plans for supporting and subsidizing actions regarding retrofit building, as well as implementing the codes to ensure that our building really meeting the net zero meters. So we are glad to be part of this international initiative, and we are really be happy to build like a consensus and a common understanding papers and positions, and implement common projects and awareness campaigns. This is exactly what we need. Working with the households, for example, and buildings is not just energy, it's socio-economic impact. It's more than energy. This is what we are looking forward. This is the impact that we are looking forward to create, as well as renewable energy, which is one of the main arms for the really creating impact, because focusing on fossil in our lives really makes our lives really become difficult. Look what we see, the climate change is fact, and we need to really to design a comprehensive actions in order to ensure that we are achieving our goals and objectives by 2050. And I think this is achievable.
Wonderful. And as you're leaving, I know you're going to have to leave us soon, but tell us a little bit quickly about what you see as your needs. What are your asks of the international community, of your government, as you're looking at what are the bottlenecks, and how would you like to see action?
They promised us in Paris that we are not going to leave anybody behind. All right, so that we approved Paris, and we've been happy to be part of this great celebration. And it was really a point that everybody feel that the world again became united to achieve a goal. But since that time, since Paris 2015 until now, there is no clear commitments from the G20 countries in order to ensure that we are really in the same boat. G20 countries, they are producing 80% of our emission, while the whole world contributing with the 20. So that until now there is no clear framework for subsidizing and providing really the help that need. At the same time, I'm asking all the third world countries, what we call development countries, really to ensure that they have doing their job in terms of developing their ambitions, at the same time designing their plans so that they will be ready for the financing and help. So the responsibility is for all of us. It's not just for the industrial world or the third world. No, it's for everybody. We have to be ready. All the world have to be ready, and the G20 countries, they have to ensure that they have actually their commitments really very clear and within a framework and accessible for everybody. So this is what we need, this is what they did promise, and this is what we are looking forward from this summit really to be determined.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And as we think about the public buildings and the opportunities and the need for us to leave no one behind, we know you are going to be leaving us behind as you depart for your next meeting. And as we do that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll move over. I'll slide over and we can sit a little closer. So thank you so much for indulging us as we change the order of our speakers. But tell us a little bit, as head of the Climate Change Unit, and in Chile, what is this agenda coming forward with? How does you view, the government is viewing this, and the kind of commitments that you're making around the built environment?
No, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here. And regarding climate policy of Chile, we set a national goal. This is carbon neutrality and resilience by 2050 at least, as the science asks us. And this is established in our climate framework law, which is in the Congress right now, in the second phase, so we are already getting it, so we are very happy. And on 2020, we present our new NDC with a lot of more ambitious than the one before. And this climate change framework law and also the NDC includes all ministries, including housing and urban planning, which of course I'm going to talk to you about later. Our law and how do we work in Chile includes governance and of course climate management, and on that we work together with this housing ministry in order to go for the goals that we are established. And for example, I would like to tell you that of course this ministry is part of your alliance, and they have an interministerial committee for sustainable construction, and they have built 140,000 of retrofitting of social housing and 70,000 renewable energy system and more than 70,000 heater replacement. So we are working on this, and this is good news. But of course, we need to put on this road to carbon neutrality and resilience. And for that, in this COP, in COP26, well, you know, we are presidency until yesterday. We were presidency of COP25. And we are going to present, in fact, on Wednesday, our long-term strategy. And that long-term strategy set goals for each ministry, and housing and urban planning ministry is also included. And we set goals on carbon emissions, like a carbon budget, and also the ministry, in fact, set goals and objectives regarding our, for example, in this case, sustainable construction. So there is how we are working, and of course we had a lot of gaps and things to work on, but I think we are going for this.
Well, it's certainly, Chile has been a front-runner country, and we are so pleased with the new steps that you're taking. And as part of these efforts, I'm wondering if you would also answer the question, what are the bottlenecks? What do you see as the barriers, the challenges that you're facing as you're looking forward to this ambitious plan?
Well, I think one important barrier is regarding coordination, because in this case, with sustainable construction, we need to coordinate as what we do as central government, but also what local governments does. And there we have a lot of issues, because we need to go together and we need to push for more goals and more ambitious goals. So I think there we need, of course, we need help, because we need to build capacities in local governments. In Chile, we are a long country. We have 16 regions and like 300 of communes. So we have a lot of local governments to build capacities and to work with them in order to implement these goals.
Great. And where do you see this conversation around circularity entering into your materials use and into some of the aspects that you were looking to the international community to also support you around?
Well, that's a good question, and in fact, I missed that in my this topic. Well, we have a roadmap of circular economy, and construction materials are included on this. So we have goals in order to recycling and reuse of materials, and there we have barriers also, because we need to go again to the territories in order to implement this, and this is what we are working on right now.
I know that there are a lot of companies out there that are doing things like science-based targets and thinking about this. What kind of mechanisms do you have for engaging with these stakeholders, whether they're business stakeholders or technical assistance providers? What are the kinds of tools or programming that you use to do stakeholder engagement?
Yes, we have some certificates about renewable housing or retrofitting housing. We also have in the Environment Ministry the program that is called Huella Chile, which is carbon footprint for the construction, and it is really good, and we hope it helps us in order to go to the construction sector. And what we are building right now is something regarding carbon footprint of the municipalities or the communes, in order to they know what are they emitting and how to manage that emissions.
Right. We always had a saying, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So now is the time to bring those pieces together. Earlier in the conversation, and I was struck by what we heard about Colombia, with the need to engage in the housing space and with the need to think about how you bring people into this agenda. What's your experience been in Chile, and how does the housing sector fit in? I know you've mentioned the municipal footprints. I'm assuming that this is something where housing is a part of that.
Yes, but it's really difficult. In Chile, we use a lot of wood to califaction, to heating, okay, the houses, most in the south of Chile, and with that we have a huge barrier, because this wood is free for the people, because they have like the wood there in their houses, so it's not easy to change that way of thinking, and this produce also a lot of pollution. So what we need to do, I think, is to work together in order to mitigate emission pollution and GHG emission, and that I think it would work better for us, but it's not easy, because the main barrier is that the people has that califaction way for free, so it's not easy to change that mind and to have this change.
Well, I think, both in the air conditioning and heating,
Yes.
those are two of the big opportunities, in addition to the construction itself, is around the choice of both refrigerants and in terms of the choice of fuel for heating. I'm going to open it up for questions with regards to Chile's experience in the built environment, but I'm going to ask one more while you all are thinking about yours, and that is, if you had a vision at 2030, what would you like to say that you've accomplished from within with your role in this space?
Well, for example, one goal that I think is really good, because we have to think in housing, and we also need to think in the city. And for example, in our long-term strategy, we are putting a goal that considers that from 2025, 100% of the new residence building will have a charge point for electric cars. And I think that is really important, because it starts to change what people think about this transformation that we need to do. So I think that would be great to see that already happened.
Yeah, I'm struck all the time about the opportunities for these linkages, right? That we're actually, in order to successfully make this transition for our cities, it has to be about transportation, it has to be about the urban form, and it has to be about the buildings themselves, and as we talked about, the heating and air conditioning. Any questions from Colombia? And actually, if you want to speak your question, and then we'll repeat it so that people can hear on the microphone. If I don't have anyone covering you, a mic, so go ahead.
Oh, is that me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Does your long-term strategy include new standards for buildings that are being, and how does it look like?
Can you repeat the question? Long-term strategies for buildings. What does that look like? Is that correct?
Yes. Like long-term strategy does it include new standards for new buildings?
New standards. Are new standards coming into the long-term strategy?
Yes, we are including new standards, and we are going to implement the new standard, because we were really slow to modify this standard, and we already did it, and we hope that the long-term strategy consider the implementation of that new standard. Okay.
Are there specific opportunities to work in the permitting with local authorities, as we saw with Cali and Colombia? Permitting authority was localized. Is that true in Chile? Tell us a little bit about how against the standards, or when the standards are implemented.
Yes, they are. It's like they are. It's mandatory, because these standards works for when the governments put construction for people, okay, we must use that standard. And what happened with the local governments is that they're not enforced on that, but it is really restricted. They don't use it, because if we, as like the central government, start to use it, they must use it also. That is the thing on how it works, and I hope it works like that.
Yeah. Enforcement has been one of those challenges in the built environment for many, many years, not just in Chile, around the world. Yes. Make sure we got the question correctly. You're asking, from the labor union perspective, was there training required, or is there training required in order to ensure you're implementing the norms?
By changing the way you build, you need to prepare the labor for it, so I was wondering how you
preparing the labor force for those new changed.
Yes, well, that's a great question, and I need to remember that I am from Environment Ministry, so I don't have all that answers, but I could say that, for example, for energy efficiency, yes, we have capacity and training for the labor, okay? And I think, of course, that these new rules that are going to be implemented consider that capacity of the labor, but I suppose that is okay. Sorry, I suppose it is, yeah.
Again, sort of these questions are very good and universal for all of us to be thinking about in terms of training.
Yeah.
Good. Any final questions? No, seeing none. I want to say thank you very much for joining us. Any final parting words, what you need from the international community, or any words of advice?
We always need something about international community. And yes, we and the Housing and Urban Planning Ministry will be happy to have more help in order to finance, for example, capacity building for people mainly in local governments, as we were saying before, and also in order to build monitoring and reporting and verifying system. There in Chile we have a big gap, and we need to work on that, and I think alliance like this will help us a lot in order to go on that.
Well, on behalf of our partners, the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, and on behalf of WRI, thank you so much for joining us, and a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you to you.
As we move now to our closing speaker, I just want to reflect on a few things that I took away from today's session. One, the real opportunity and need that was articulated to move in terms of our technical agenda in thinking about things that we have not yet built in, the circularity questions, the view of housing, thinking about the sectors, thinking about the people, building in these questions associated with fuel usage, and around thinking through urban planning and the urban agenda as it relates to this. I am so pleased that we've been able to have these kinds of spotlights shown today on Turkey, on what's happening in the cities, on Colombia, on Chile, on Jordan, and I know that there were several others who had wanted to participate virtually but couldn't make it work. So we apologize that a few of the little technical glitches, and I'm going to move us now to have final closing remarks from Regie Meyer, who has been a long-standing leader in the built environment space, knows no introduction, from the French government, the Ministry of Ecological Transition, and a delegate of France to the Global ABC. So please, Regie, your final words.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm most grateful to be closing this rich, critical and timely discussion. I'm presenting, as Jennifer said, the France Ministry of Ecological Transition as co-chair of the Global ADG. I say co-chair with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Today, the need for buildings decarbonization has become mainstream for many cities, regions and countries, but not all. In government, if governments are mobilized in decarbonization of energy sector and transport, less attention was paid to the decarbonization of the building sector. The role of the sector in the climate emergency was not visible. And I think that the Global ABC answered that since 2015, from Global ABC, we try to make it visible. Every year, the publication of the Global ABC Global Status Report provides a picture of buildings' direct and indirect emission. In fact, indirect emission are twice the amount of direct emission, so but not visible in the inventory. Now we are seeing building decarbonization roadmaps and strategy becoming the key instruments in the national climate policies, and this event focus on local and national government prove it. Let me give some other example. We see the transformation in motion in every region, Latin America, Asia, also Africa, North America, and Europe. Post-COVID recovery plan underlines the importance of the sector. Second, energy efficiency in buildings is the second most popular climate policy in NDC, only after development of renewable energy for power generation. And that underlines the great capacity of energy efficiency as first step for the decarbonization of the building sector. Emerging roadmaps adapted to local context are providing clear goals, vision and frameworks for cooperation among all actors in the value chain, including banks, on investor and national and local government. For example, in France, I talk some example I know, the building sector is a key part of the national low carbon strategy, and under EU rule, European government have to submit buildings energy innovation national strategy. Global ABC and its members with WRI, the Green Building Council and the Global Environmental Fund are working together to tackle the sector fragmentation and to build bridge between the myriad of national, subnational and local markets and actors. Global ABC mission is to foster greater ambition by government, national or local, and encourage a deep market transformation. Government have a special responsibility in this transformation toward the low-carbon building sector. This responsibility is particularly important as the sector is not structured by a few players, but mainly run by a constellation of small and middle-sized enterprises acting in isolated markets. It is also a special responsibility given the high cultural value of buildings. You have to remember, sometimes we forget. The declaration Buildings and Critical Climate Solution provides an avenue to streamline government and private sector collaboration. I invite first mover to join this declaration. By now, a few countries, including France, are implementing building regulation and policies in line with the content of the declaration. For instance, as of next year, a limit in the level of embodied carbon per square meter will be in place in France, a limit that will be reinforced in 2027 and 2031. So I invite Global ABC members to start policy discussion on this area as soon as possible. I want to stress also that addressing the building sector is instrumental to achieving the main goal of Paris Agreement, meaning mitigation, adaptation, and the reorientation of the financial flow. To notice only that real estate and buildings amount almost half of the global wealth. So that means the financing or the greening of the building go with the greening of the finance, or vice versa. At Global ABC, we are determined to bring climate adaptation also in the building for the forefront. I invite you to read the first Buildings and Climate Change Adaptation Call to Action report from the GABC and to join the 10 principles for effective action in adaptation to be launched next week, the 8th, Monday. Global ABC unique added value is that we help our members to have a wider and deeper impact. In the 6 years since its launch, Global ABC has become the sectoral umbrella facilitating cooperation for the transition towards zero-emission, efficient and resilient building. We have achieved a lot, but let's be honest. In these 6 years, we have just laid the foundation. Now let's continue building our common house together. Let's foster cooperation to scale up and speed up the transition toward more comfortable, cleaner and resilient building. Today, it's the first day. We have before us 2 intense weeks of work, so I invite you to join the full array of events of the building pavilion. Thank you.